Kusiak with us today. Uh, 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 I just want to say that talking about solar, to me, it's a great benefit to be embracing youth here, because as you'll hear, Jackson is recently trained and very experienced already for his young years. And I always like to say I like to have a young doctor because they're recently trained. Well, I think it applies to technology and alternative energy as well, since it's moving so fast. So we're delighted to have him. As I said before, we're going to cover a lot of ground today with a general kind of theme of community solar. So there's a lot to learn, and Jackson has prepared some presentations. So and we will hopefully have some Q&A towards the end. But the Adult Academy Planning Committee has decided to set aside next Sunday for a second Sunday on solar energy. We should have some responses from our questionnaire about people's interest and awareness of solar for themselves, for their neighborhoods, for low and moderate income people, et cetera. So we look forward to that. And again, if you look at the questionnaire and complete that and send it in, that would be great. Jackson has about 10 years of experience working generally in environmental justice. He has a recent degree, fairly recent degree from Oberlin College in environmental studies. He started out, since he was already in Ohio, he started out working on the impact of fracking in West Virginia and Ohio, and got some valuable experience there in organizing, et cetera. He came to Philadelphia and joined Solar States, first as a hands-on installer, which he still does, and then doing training and solar sales over the last couple of years. So I told him we would not hold it against him that he hails from the Boston area.
I love it.
It's a healthy rivalry, I think. So I just want to say, Jackson, it's a pleasure. You and I have had a good talk, and it's a real pleasure to have you. And take it from here.
All right. Thank you all so much for having me. I was not expecting such a large crowd, and I'm happy to be here on a Sunday morning. So appreciate the introduction there, and I'm just gonna try to briefly kind of go into it myself, and then I'm gonna kind of toggle between a few presentations here because John asked me to cover a lot of ground, so I'm gonna bear with me as I kind of make this work. So just to kind of go over this again, my background is in community organizing, and really became aware of a lot of environmental issues in my early years in college. And in the 2010s is when fracking really started happening heavily in Ohio, and became involved in organizing around water quality impacts, around the waste issues with coal and fracking, and just kind of began to see the oil and gas and coal industries just running rampant in communities and taking advantage in particular of low-income communities, rural communities, communities of color. And it's a hard thing to struggle against something, and work against something all the time without knowing exactly what you're working for. So I moved to Philadelphia about 5 years ago, and basically sought out a way to try to get involved in the solar industry, and was able to get hired with Solar States, even with very minimal experience in the construction industries, because they do have a focus on education and training, and they really do value environmental justice. And so they saw that as a plus. And so I worked as an installer for a couple years, mostly doing roof work, some electrical work. And for the last 2 years, I've been in the sales role, but I always wanted to bring my community organizing background with me. And so I didn't want to just sell solar in the way of like, whoever comes to it, let's try to make it happen for them. I really wanted to see what we could do to make solar more affordable and accessible Immediately jumped in with Solarize Philly. We're on our 5th round of Solarize Philly now. I've been part of it since Solarize Phase 3. And, I helped actually administer the low and moderate income program that's folks at the Philadelphia Energy Authority and Solar States collaborated on, called the Solar Savings Grant Program. I'll go into a good bit of detail about that, but we were successful in getting 50 homeowners a very low cost solar array. And they're all based in different neighborhoods in Philadelphia. And in the last 2 years, I've been really focusing on trying to build local community-led solar initiatives. So been collaborating with a number of pastors and nonprofits and local residents in Hunting Park to help create the Hunting Park Community Solar Initiative, which I'll touch on, and have also been working with a number of folks in the climate activism world in Montgomery County. In fact, I believe Bill Saby's in the room today. So shout out Bill, and the Ready for 100 crews in Montco, helping us get Solarize Montco off the ground and really trying to grow the solar in the whole region. That's a bit about myself. Now, just talking about Solar States. So we are locally owned and operated in North Philadelphia. We're in the Fishtown, Kensington area, and we've been around since 2008, which is pretty long when it comes to solar companies. For perspective, in 2008, there was less than a megawatt of solar in the entire state of Pennsylvania. You can put a megawatt on a couple acres of land. So it's a perspective that there was very little solar going on. And in Philadelphia in particular, a lot of row homes were being denied outright because big companies like Sunrun and Vivint and Tesla, they said we don't even want to install on flat roofs. So we figured we could have a niche of let's figure out how we can work with Philly permitting agencies, Philly row homes, but also let's see if we can build a green collar economy. Founder of Solar States, Micah Gold Markell, this one down here, he was really keen on trying to build a pathway to solar workforce development. And, he worked with a number of schools, technical and vocational schools throughout the city, including OIC, ECA, Youth Build, as well as the Philadelphia School District, to develop a really robust solar training curriculum. And, we've graduated just probably hundreds of students at this point, and many of whom have gone on to work in the solar industry and for Solar States in particular. So we are a B Corp with a dual mission to do both education and installation. So I'm going to talk briefly about sort of how solar works, and then just to kind of get everybody on the same page, and then I'll kind of dive into some specific examples around Second Baptist Church, around some of these initiatives we've done to try to make solar more cost effective for low-income communities. So in Pennsylvania, we have a very important law called net metering that people may be familiar with, but I'll just go over the basics of solar, where you have essentially panels on your roof are converting photons from the sun into electrons, and they create DC electrical current. Now you need an inverter to make that DC into AC current. And once you have AC power, you can tap in with the main service panel in your building, and typically you run directly off of solar power during the day. You'll be powering the loads in your house, and your toaster will be running off of that solar energy. Now, when a cloud passes over or when the sun goes down at night, you still need power. So to get away with intermittency, we make sure that we have some sort of grid reliability. And so we're always, usually interconnecting in a grid tied way. We can talk about off-grid solar, but that's for another day. Today, we're going to talk about how we use the grid to basically store our power, or if you're not using your power, your neighbors are. And when you need power, you can still get power from the grid. And that's all because there's a meter now that can spin both directions. And when you're spinning that meter backwards, you're getting credits put on your bill. And when you're spinning it forwards, you're using some of those credits. And the goal is that you don't have to pay an electric bill anymore, and that actually, you should be really in control of your own energy and not being reliant on PICO or the utility in your area. So just to give you a sense of how this works in PICO territory, you can see that there's a new line item on the bill where you'll show kilowatt hours to and from the grid. And if you produce more than you consume in a month, you'll actually bank some credits, which will roll over to future months. And then you can really tackle the major charges on the bill, the generation, distribution, and transmission charges. And all you're left with is like a $10 customer charge. it's pretty typical that a utility still charges you a small fee, a flat fee, for being grid interconnected. But we can get rid of, the old thing of paying $100, $150, $200 a month to the utility for all their dirty energy, and we can just, create our own energy and still have reliable electricity on demand. Now, when we look at the usage for a typical home, we know that it doesn't stay constant every month. Typically, we see an increase in the summer months and sometimes also in the winter. Usually it's lowest in the springtime. And so, solar will also fluctuate, right? There's not as many sun hours in the winter, and it's cloudier and all that. So we try to look at what you're doing on an annual basis and whether we can produce that much on an annual basis. And we use that sort of rollover with net metering to cover you throughout the year. In Pennsylvania, you are allowed to go over 100% of what your capacity is, but PECO doesn't have to give you the full value of your electricity when you're producing more than you're consuming on an annual basis. They tally it up in May, and if you have more credits left over in May, they do pay out, but they only give you half the rate. Typically in PECO territory, electricity costs around 13, 14 cents a kilowatt hour. They'll only give you about 6 or 7 cents for any extra electricity. So typically it makes sense to get as close as you can to 100% without going above it. From a financial standpoint, that's typically the best way to go when you're doing a grid tied solar. Now, something to think about in Pennsylvania is that, well, we may be paying 13, 14 cents today, but that is not going to be the same when we look out in the future. And really, we got to think about 20, 25 years from now, because that's generally the warranty that's available for panels, and that's what we consider the life of the system. Now, mind you, there are solar panels that were installed in the late 70s that are still kicking out electricity today. There's nothing to say that at 20 years they're going to stop working, but that warranty is 25 years. And so, we look at, hey, electricity rates, just like everything else, inflation, are continuing to rise. And so the benefit of solar, the economic benefit, actually continues to grow over time. Now, if you want to think a little bit about why electricity rates are continuing to grow, I think it's very important to look at what the various sources of electricity are in the state of Pennsylvania and nationally. So in Pennsylvania, we are a fossil fuel and energy powerhouse. We do everything under the sun here. We were, first oil wells were drilled in PA, and they're still kicking out new forms of technology like fracking, right? And so, but most of our electricity right now is coming from nuclear and coal. But as you can see on this chart here, while solar has been getting a whole lot less expensive, along with wind, the green line there, the nuclear and coal industry have been completely battling this fact that it's very expensive to produce their power, and without government subsidies, they can't really compete. And so nuclear plants are closing, including 3 Mile Island, and others are slated to close. And coal is generally on its way out. The real bear in the room, though, is the natural gas industry. They've drilled over 12,000 fracking wells in upstate Pennsylvania, and they have just a huge glut of natural gas. And so we have to compete against the fact that companies like PECO are looking at their infrastructure, and they're saying, well, rather than maybe rapidly transitioning to renewables, why don't we use natural gas as a quote unquote bridge fuel? And they're basically building big pipelines and putting $300 million into replacing equipment that what used to run on coal and running it on natural gas. And as long as we're doing that, we're going to be expected to pay PECO to do that. And we're going to have to do that at a rate of more and more every year, because they got to get a return on investment for their $300 million investment that they're doing in natural gas. So it's not all bad news, though, because solar is growing and we do have some good policies. And I think that there are some ways that we can really take back our energy and not be so reliant on PECO. I'm going to touch on a bit about the incentives we have, both nationally and locally. And so, one thing that's really important to the solar industry, and it's been around since 2005, is called the investment tax credit. And it used to be a value of 30% of the solar array would actually be a tax credit that you receive back, typically as a large refund check at the end of the tax year. It did step down, and it was slated to go away under Trump's presidency, but it got extended, luckily, at 26% under a coronavirus stimulus bill. So till the end of 2022, we still have a 26% tax credit as long as you get installed this year. So, but there is some urgency behind this because it is going down to 22% and it is going away entirely for residential and almost entirely away for commercial or utility scale solar. This is bad news for the solar industry because it will really affect affordability, and it will really impact, just sort of the growth and scale of solar. There is some chance that the Build Back Better Act will be passed with a provision that would increase it to 30% and extend it for 10 years. In the bill that passed the House, that's what it had in it. But when Joe Manchin gets his grubby hands on things, he has a way of slashing and burning good policy. So we'll see what happens. But we're still in a good space with tax credits. This is another really important incentive that we have here in the state of Pennsylvania, and they're called SRECs. SRECs are solar renewable energy certificates, essentially a sort of a stock market for solar energy that exists in the state of Pennsylvania. And every time you make a megawatt hour, you also make one of these credits, and you can, use a broker to sell them for you, and you can basically get a direct deposit in your bank account every couple months. A typical solar array will produce somewhere between 5 and 15 megawatt hours in a year. That's for residential, I should say. And, you might make, a couple $100 on SRECs. We're hoping that they'll go the direction of neighboring states like New Jersey or Massachusetts, Maryland, where SRECs are worth a whole lot more. In New Jersey, they were worth over $200 for a long time. Massachusetts, they're worth almost $300. And, it really impacts it because it can be a new revenue stream for homeowners. Not only do they save money on their bill, but, in Pennsylvania, you can make hundreds of dollars a year. In other states, you can make thousands of dollars a year on your solar, just sitting there on your roof, producing energy and SRECs for you. So that's a really great thing. And we hope that they increase the clean energy standard and we get higher SRECs in the future. Now, I'm just going to touch a little bit on how we mount solar panels. A lot of people are familiar with pitch roof mounting systems and have probably seen this sort of flashing and rail model. And so what we do is we actually drill attachment points to the rafters of the roof, and then we flash them, basically, putting a water shield, in between the lag bolt and going under the shingle line there. And then we run horizontal rails. And we typically will mount microinverters. So that's the converting DC to AC on those rails. Underneath each panel, they have their own microinverter. And then when you're done, you have these nice, clean, crisp solar arrays that are flush mounted to whatever the pitch of the roof is. Now, this is very typical for suburban homes and pitched roofs. Philadelphia, we are often dealing with flat roofs. So with flat roofs, we have basically two ways that we can implement a solar installation. One is through a ballast racking. Now, ballast rackings are really important because they protect the roof and you don't actually have to drill any physical attachments. And so you're not worried as much about pooling and water that could potentially leak through the roof. So with ballasting, essentially you have these trays that will, sit the cinder blocks on them, and then we can mount the panels at a pitch, hopefully towards the south so that they're getting a little bit more efficient. And you're able to, weigh the whole system down, and it's actually still rated for hurricane force winds, and it's not going anywhere, but you are easy, it's easy to install, and it doesn't require drilling any holes in your roof. You can also do a rail mount racking. With rail, you're able to actually maximize the panel density because you actually don't have the gaps in between the rows that you see here with the ballast. And you can mount things in portrait or landscape and kind of squeeze them in around various obstructions on the roof. And when we do rail mount, we really take care to protect those attachment points using this ChemCurb sealant, which essentially we're putting a whole lot of roofing sealant and this protective attachment around the lag bolt itself. And this is the roof, what we have on our roof in Kensington, and essentially you can see you can lift up these rails if you need to, you can tilt them, you can do what you need to with them. And I'll just show you back a couple slides. There are two different types of ballast racking. On the right was the one I was showing you before. This is EcoFoot. It's a south-facing racking. This is really lovely because you get a little extra efficiency when you tilt them to the south. But there are gaps in between the rows. So there's another way to do ballast racking that doesn't require quite as much space, and that's called D-dome. And it's an east-west racking. It's not quite as efficient, but it's a little bit of a tighter design and works pretty well for certain row homes. So you can see these are, oftentimes these are the main ways that we're installing in Philadelphia. Now, a lot of people ask about grid resilience and batteries. Now, I'm not going to go too much into it, but just to say that we do install them. They are out there. Mostly what we're talking about is not an off-grid system, but a more like a grid agnostic system. Like if the grid is there, we're going to use it and do the net metering. But if the grid fails and we have a blackout, you have stored power somewhere. And that's a beautiful thing because you can create your own microgrid, power certain loads in your house. And, you have remote control of the Tesla Powerwall or the LG Chem Enphase. We have a variety of batteries. These batteries are generally modular. You can add multiple of them depending on how much power you want. So, this is a good option, although it's very expensive. I'm not going to lie. Typically, batteries will double the cost of a solar installation. So most solar installations we go forward with as off-grid, but we do have, as grid tied, but we do have off-grid capabilities if need be. All right, I'm going to try to move right along here. Hardware monitoring, I mentioned the microinverters. They produce a monitoring system. It's really awesome. It's an app that you can see how each panel is doing. And this is how we maintain systems as well, right? So if there's any issue with the system, we get an alert on our app. And then we get, basically we can send our service and maintenance crew out to your house. We're able to identify exactly where the issue may be. If the squirrel chewed a wire or the monitoring system isn't operational, we can pinpoint that area and fix that. And with microinverters, one of the values of them is, if a single panel's offline, that doesn't mean the whole system's down. In fact, a single panel being offline is, a minimal impact on the overall solar array. And again, you have those 25-year warranties from the manufacturer. And in Solar States, we offer a 10-year workmanship warranty. So typically maintenance doesn't come with a cost because you can get a new panel and we'll install it for you at no cost. So we want to make sure that you're really guaranteed to have this solar producing for you for a long time, and that the costs are all sort of borne upfront or through a loan program, but not that you're having to have some big unexpected costs down the line. Now, one of the things I like to show people is how we do solar design now. We do a lot of computer-aided design. I can, pretty quickly develop a design for any house, through a computer program using Google Maps and another, couple programs I have. But when we actually, want to get closer to actually approximating what your roof looks like, we will come out to your house and conduct a survey. Typically, we do this with a drone. We'll fly a drone over the property and we'll create this 3D rendering, which we're able to really pinpoint how many panels we can fit. It measures down to 1/8 of an inch. We'll know how we're going to run our conduit and where we need to mount a couple pieces of electrical equipment. Now, a typical solar array needs, these two components. There's an AC disconnect switch. This is essentially an emergency shutoff that PICO and the fire department need access to. And there's a combiner box. And this is where all the strings and microinverters are combined into a breaker. And then they send that computer monitoring out through Wi-Fi or a cell chip. And then, these are basically two pieces of equipment that we need to mount in order to make solar work. And then we'll interconnect with your main service panel. Now, just going to take a moment here to kind of stop for a second and make sure everybody's sort of familiar with the solar before I kind of jump into the next piece, which is to discuss a bit more about the programs that we have for low and moderate income communities. Does anybody have a question about all this stuff I kind of talked about with the basics of solar?
Yeah, I have a question. So the question I think that's on a lot of people's minds is, so if you have a problem with your roof after the installation, leaking, et cetera, how is that handled? And is that, does it come under your company or do you have to go? So just explain about that.
It's a great question. And it's usually people's first question. So thank you, Stan. So as you can imagine, a lot of roofers are not happy to guarantee somebody else's work. And so that's why we offer our 10-year workmanship warranty, which is actually sort of industry leading. A lot of companies offer more like a 5-year warranty. So for us, if there's a roof leak, that's our problem because we're considering that was the installation that caused it. And so we got to be the ones to fix it. If that means we got to climb on the roof and we got to reseal that area, if that means we have to come in your house and we have to clean up whatever drywall issue may have happened. You know, that is something that happens from time to time. But I will say that, like, vast majority of our solar installations, this has not been an issue for us. And, you know, we've been in business for over 10 years. So we've seen these systems age. And after that point, I just want to say, even without the warranty, we'll still work under contract for you all, right? Like, we will maintain your system. It would just be like, we'd have to do a service and maintenance contract, a couple $100. Like, okay, let's get this situation fixed. Let's get your monitoring fixed. So we'll still be there. And that is something of the value of being with a local company, which is that you can actually get a hold of somebody on the phone. You can easily reach us. We're in the neighborhood. We'll be out in a couple of days. So we do want to guarantee the roof, and that's true for any type of system, ballast or any of the penetrative roof attachments.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. So knowing that you're handling a whole lot of responsibility there with the roof, does the roof, in other words, say your roof is 10 years old or aging, what's your thought process with that? The new roof first, or? Yeah.
Great question, Stan. Thank you. So our cutoff is 10 years, exactly. So we want your roof to be at least have been redone, you know, fixed up, recoated, something within 10 years. And, you know, ideally, we like to work on the newest possible roofs, right? You know, 1 to 2 years is ideal. And we can help people, you know, get referrals with good roofers and get access to good roofing products so that are lower cost. All right, I'm gonna pause on you, Stan. I do see a couple other questions, and we'll try to move quickly. And then John did ask me to sort of hold some questions for the end because there's a fair amount more material. So quickly, Paige, if you want to go for it.
I have a friend who just got a Tesla roof where they're individual tiles. So it looks just like a roof and you don't have the panels. That's a lot more expensive? You're not moving in that direction? Yeah,
we are not. It's typically like 4 to 5 times as expensive. I've heard a quote of like $100,000 for that type of roof, as opposed to a typical solar installation for like 20 grand.
Yeah. It was around 20,000. So.
Oh, okay. I mean, it's amazing. Yeah. And also the other thing with Tesla, I'll just say, is like their products can be hard to access. Like, we can order a Powerwall and they won't come for 10 months or something like that. Like, they have some real supply chain issues. So when we see that come down in price and when we see it be more affordable and reasonable to install, we will learn how to do it. I mean, we're certified Tesla installers, but we don't currently offer that.
I'm surprised that there aren't more manufacturers that are moving in this direction, because then it would be just like you change your roof. You have to redo your roof, so you redo it to be a solar roof.
Absolutely. All right. Hey, Liz, good to see you. You got a quick question?
Yeah, I just want to state an obvious thing for anyone with an asphalt roof or a bitumen roof, in other words, a flat roof. It's critically important that the roof be sound, because these roofs typically do not last as long as a shingled roof, a pitched roof. So you want to make sure that your roof is sound. And I hired Solar States about 3 years ago to do a property that I own. So I did install a new roof
too, Liz. I don't know if you remember that, but I was up there.
Yeah. You must have just started. Yeah.
Literally.
But anyway, so it was a new roof. I did install a new roof, and then I had it white coated. And the white coatings is just something that is very important for folks to understand. When you see these pictures that Jackson is showing, a lot of those roofs are white coated. The white coating does many, many things for you. It preserves the roof. It extends the life of the roof. So rather than having a roof that'll only last 8 to 10 years, you can recoat that roof rather than have to re-roof. And personally, I plan to recoat the roof around the solar system. So when I need to recoat, I'm not taking the system down. I'm just going to recoat the roof. It also improves very slightly the efficiency of the panels, because it reflects more useful radiant sunlight on those panels. So it'll increase the system efficiency. And then probably the biggest benefit is that it lowers your air conditioning bill by about 20%. So a highly reflective roof will cut your air conditioning load by about 22% in our region. So if you've got a flat roof, think about white coating it.
Great. Thank you, Liz.
Jackson, I know we have more questions, but I also know that we really want to hear more about low and moderate income initiatives.
Understood.
So maybe we could just carry, I love all the questions, but maybe we could just carry them over towards the end or even next week.
Sounds like a plan. Appreciate it. And thank you for that information, Liz. It's really important. So yeah, I'm gonna touch on a couple things with my particular interest, which is supporting low and moderate income solar programs. So I'm gonna just quickly talk about the city-run program and then a community-led initiative, and then I will also touch on the project which you have all been involved in, which is supporting Second Baptist Church and Philadelphia Interfaith Hospitality Network in getting solar on their roof. So it's very important to me that solar development happens in an equitable manner, especially as we are here in Philadelphia, with a very large proportion of our population being low income. This is an installation we did that is actually on the Yards Brewery, and this, just an example of a large commercial development here in this city. So one thing I did mention before, the Solar States, we are a B Corp, and as a certified B Corp, we really want to focus on what our impact is on, both people, our community, and our employees, as well as our environmental impact, and that we have a focus on environmental justice. And so, working with Solar States, been able to really develop these ideas. A huge way that we do this is in collaboration with a variety of schools and city agencies, technical and vocational classes. I mentioned people want to learn more about this or interested, have young people or people in their lives that want to learn how to become a solar installer or enter the industry, please look at our website and get involved. And this is a big way that we really try to support, particularly people coming out of lower income communities to get access to green jobs and good paying jobs. And we also, take pride in the fact that we try to pay a living wage, that we pay, we offer benefits. It's full-time year-round work. And it's work that I believe has a good deal of dignity, which is very important in this economy. Now, one of the programs that has been really successful and is really a model that I want to help grow is the Solar Savings Grant Program. And this is a program that was administered by the Philadelphia Energy Authority, and Solar States was the only installer for this program. And it did a number of things to get rid of the barriers to entry for solar. One of which is that you are able to get solar for around less than half the cost of a typical solar array. I'll kind of go into this. Somebody asked the question, what is the cost of a typical solar array? A typical solar array will run somewhere between $10,000 to $30,000, with the median number being around $20,000 to $22,000. This program was, the highest cost of the solar array was $10,000, and the lowest cost was around $2,000. So we were able to completely slash the cost through a number of grants and government subsidies. And then also we were able to offer that amount of money to get the solar installation on a loan that did not require a FICO score. So it did not have a credit requirement, which is a huge barrier for low-income people to access the loans to even be able to pay for solar. Because the goal is, hey, we swap out your electric bill for a loan payment that's less than what you're paying right now. But that only works if you can actually get approved for credit. And so that's a beautiful thing. And the other thing that's really important here is that, we income restricted this, so you had to be at or below 80% of the area median income. And so in Philadelphia, this is what that looked like. Depending on your household size, it varied, but basically you had to make less than this sum of money in order to participate in this program and benefit from the grant subsidy. So here you can see an example on the left of a typical Solarize Philly, proposal. And on the left side of it, you'll see that, this is a typical size, 5 kW, typical offset 90%. It's about 14 solar panels. And this base price for this is around $16,000. Now, Solarize Philly does come with a discount. And so we're guaranteeing that you're getting $1,500 off. And, that's a nice discount that really is a lovely reason to go with Solarize Philly. You can still sign up with Solarize Philly today, and I do encourage you to do so. And then you can take tax credit off of that. And so the actual cost to you is more like $11,000 for the whole system. If you were to finance it, okay, there's some dealer fees involved and there's an interest rate involved. So you're going to pay more money over time, but it's still a reasonable amount of money. And, this is a good quote. This is a reasonable quote in the city of Philadelphia. Now, if you look on the right, this is what we tried to do to make it even more accessible. So the same size system, we offered at actually $5,000 off of 15. So it's about a third of the cost. And the way we were able to do this is a mixture of a grant that brought the cost from 15 down to 9, and then they're purchasing the SRECs up front. And so the Philadelphia Energy Authority is buying the SRECs from the city and from these individuals, and they're buying them upfront for 15 years. And so with those 2 grants, they were able to get the cost way down. And then you can see, compared to a monthly payment of $130, it was only a fixed monthly payment of $48, which looks a lot better when you compare it against what they're currently paying. Now, low-income homeowners tend to use a lot less electricity, and so their PICO bill may be lower to start with. So, but we were able to say, hey, you can switch off PICO, get all that energy covered by solar, add back in the loan payment, and you're still paying less than you would otherwise pay. And we are trying to guarantee at least 10% savings for homeowners through this program. And for most people, this was like a no-brainer. No cost to go solar, immediately start saving money, and you're working towards ownership. It's not a leasing model. It's actually a program where you would own it after the loan term, which was 15 years. And this was a very successful program. We were able to get 50 low-income solar homeowners, and they were in 26 different neighborhoods in Philadelphia, all throughout the city. And we're really proud of this program. We're going to really try to replicate it and do something similar to it again. And one of the reasons I think this is so important is that this is an image of a protest that took place around the Philadelphia Energy. The PES refinery down in Southwest Philadelphia. And when we think about the impact of environmental racism and environmental injustice, we find that low-income communities are often burdened with oil and gas industry, toxic waste, and the impacts of climate change are most heavily felt by them. But oftentimes, they're also the people who are leading the solution, who want the change the most, who are trying the hardest to fight against the oil and gas and coal industries, who are trying the hardest to get renewable energy, and that they're locked out of it because of a credit score or because of a high cost. And so we really want to focus on the importance of environmental justice in all of this. As a small matter, or not a small matter, I also want to just say that we are looking at completely transitioning the refinery space into a renewable energy space. And people may know that the refinery is now closed and was purchased by a company named Hilco. Solar States is trying our best to be involved in actually transitioning that space, it's particularly into a solar renewable energy development zone. Now, another thing I want to talk about is inequity in solar development. Now, if you look at this, this is a map of all the installation Solar States has done in North Philadelphia. Now, you can see that there are some areas that have a lot more solar installations than others. And, a lot of this tracks with higher income neighborhoods, areas that are gentrifying faster, and areas that have larger Black and brown communities, low income communities are not seeing as much solar development. This is something that we are trying to address by trying to make solar access more equitable, but also through community outreach strategies. It's not enough just to make it cheaper. You also have to get the word out about it. And that's part of what I'm trying to do here today, and why I think it's so important to do trainings and share the information about solar in various community forums. So one program that I'm really proud of being a part of is the Hyundai Park Community Solar Initiative. This is something that we actually built in collaboration with a number of pastors, and Alan Drew at the Climate Witness Project, Matt and Andy Kim of One Hope and 8th Street Community Church. And they started reaching out to community organizations in Huntington Park, including Huntington Park Community Garden, Huntington Park Neighborhood Advisory Commission, HP Green, a local, nonprofit environmental justice organization, and some larger institutions like North 10, the Lenfest Center, Esperanza, the Office of Sustainability. And, Solar States kind of said to all of them that, hey, we know you're having, they wanted to get solar on their church roofs initially. And I said, well, I'm happy to produce a proposal for you and happy to help you make that possible. To date, it's been very difficult to raise the capital to make that possible. But we said we can create an initiative where we'll get the word out with you. We'll offer reduced prices. We'll get people into these various programs, and we'll try to get solar installed on various rooftops. And we'll offer, if you guys help refer people to our network, we'll offer discounts, and we'll offer referral bonuses and donations to folks in Hunting Park to help spur this transition that we're hoping to do. You can see here, this is a list of some of the block captains that we have in Hunting Park that are helping us get the word out, the various institutions in that neighborhood. We're trying to really densely be involved in a lot of different groups that can help us get the word out about renewable energy. And again, this idea of front lines of crisis, forefront of change. I'll just kind of switch over to another presentation to give you a sense of what I'm talking about when I say that in Hunting Park. Hunting Park is one of the hottest neighborhoods in Philadelphia. There was a Beat the Heat study that said, looked at certain neighborhoods and looked at how, climate impacts were going to impact it. In some days in the summer, it's like 30 degrees hotter in certain parts of Hunting Park than it is in Germantown, right? And that is a factor of tree cover, of commercial and industrial zoning. It has to do with redlining and the economic infrastructure that exists. But another thing that's important to remember is these areas are also very sunny. And solar, as Liz said, if we can get a white coat on your roof and we can get solar panels on your roof, we can actually reduce the heat burden of your house while also making it more affordable for you to run an air conditioner. And some of these community organizations will give you a free air conditioner. And so we can actually tackle both climate mitigation and adaptation at the same time. Like we can actually produce renewable energy while also offsetting some of the worst impacts of climate change. And I think this is really important when we think about this. So again, here's all of the community partners, and just a quick look at it. We do offer a cheaper discounted array in Hunting Park. This is even without any discount coming from the city. This is discounted off of a typical Solarize Philly price. We're giving an even cheaper price to somebody who lives in Hunting Park. So this is a part of what we're trying to do. And we're trying to really make this more feasible for homeowners in Hunting Park. So lastly, I just here, let me see where I was. Okay, this is what I wanted to say. Sorry. Not only are we looking at residential, we're also looking at commercial properties. I mentioned here that this is one of the largest installations in the city that we've done. It's close to 2,000 panels, almost a megawatt on the Yards Brewery, Target, and Philadelphia City Archives. So we're looking in Hunting Park as well at some institutions like the Esperanza Health Center. This has been a real important institution in the last couple of years as they've been administering vaccines and testing and serving as a resource for people in this community. We're looking at trying to offset their usage. Oftentimes with commercial buildings, you'll see a number of air compressors and units on the roof that we have to avoid, but we can still make solar work in that environment. This is a small system that we'd love to see happen on One Hope Community Church. With 10 kW, we can get 100% offset for this community church. We'd love to see this happen. As to date, we haven't been able to raise the funds for it, but hopefully we can make this happen for folks in Hunting Park. This is another wonderful church in Hunting Park called Spirit and Truth Fellowship. They can get 100% offset with a much larger, almost 45, almost 50 kW system. And we're really proud of the work we're doing with Vocasio, which is a career prep high school. We're actually building a new solar classroom in Hunting Park, and then we're going to try to make it solar powered. This is a much larger system to power not only Vocasio, but also the commercial businesses that are associated with this building. And this would be more like 100 kW. So this is just a look at some of the scale of projects that we're looking to do, not only for residential homeowners in Hunting Park, but also for churches and schools and nonprofits in the area as well. Sorry, lastly, get out of here. Oh, we have done work on schools. So this is an example of a school we did in New Jersey with an integrated ground mount and rooftop solar design. So while we're talking about churches, I thought it would be exciting for everybody to see what we've done with Second Baptist Church. So let me go back a little bit here. So this is a really amazing project, and it's actually something I'm very proud of because I've been working for years to try to help churches and nonprofits go solar, and this is the first one I've ever been able to actually close. And with the help of a generous donation from FUMCOG, we were able to make this possible, as well as a number of other donors and supporters. And so the idea here is that Second Baptist has a wonderful roof space, and they have plenty of space for even more solar than we're going to put up there. But we chose 2 roofs that were recently redone. This flat roof had been redone within the last 2 years. And then this roof had been redone within the last 10 years as well. And if people are familiar with the Philadelphia Interfaith Hospitality Network, or PIN, they have offices in the parsonage, this small building back here. And they do have usage at that location.
Right.
But they also have a couple buildings nearby where they do some more of their homeless advocacy and outreach work. And all those buildings have electrical costs associated with them, but they don't have great roofs for solar. And so somebody, I believe Larry Moyer is on this call, he came to me with the idea of trying to use what's called virtual net metering. And this allows us to produce solar at one location, but actually credit it to meters in various locations. The rule with it in Pennsylvania is it has to be within 2 miles. So luckily all these buildings are relatively close to each other. And so what we're going to do is PIN is going to have an array, and I'll just, this is, just give me a moment here. PIN's array will be, there will be some conduit which runs and is eventually trenched to the parsonage and will be attached to the main service panel in the parsonage, which is a bill that PIN owns. And because they have several bills in their name, they're able to credit excess electricity to these other sort of overflow. The electrons, are happening in a virtual accounting sort of way. So you've got a 15 kW system on the roof here, but they only need 5 kW worth of power at this parsonage. So the extra 10 kW will spill over to 2 other locations, if that makes sense. Now, while we were trying to make this happen, we also said to Second Baptist, well, do you guys want your own solar array? As long as we're up there, maybe we can make this cheaper for everybody if we can just make solar happen. They wanted to do it on their own roof. And so we picked this very sunny roof, and we're able to design a system, another 11 kW system that Second Baptist was paying for on their own. And they were able to, together create a larger system. It's a 27 kW. It's going to be a nice offset for Second Baptist. It's not 100%, but it's a good chunk of about 30% of their usage at the building. And then PIN is going to offset close to 75% of their offset at 3 buildings. So it's going to completely offset the parsonage and partially offset 2 other buildings. So we're really proud of this, and we think it's an important model of low-income solar development, because we're actually supporting nonprofits that are helping those who are struggling the most, who are on the streets, who are, need a warm place to go in these cold winter months. And now they'll be able to make sure that those houses stayed heated and the lights stay on, and they're not worried about those utility costs going up and up, because they're producing their own energy from a renewable source. So again, we're really thankful to FUMCOG for supporting this project, and we'd love to see more of these types of projects, like on some of those institutions I mentioned in Hunting Park, and potentially many other churches and nonprofits throughout the city. So that's most of what I have to offer in terms of a discussion about, low-income solar here in Philadelphia. There's plenty more to be said, and a lot of really great work that Solar States is doing and others are doing. But I just, I know that there's a lot of people on this call, and feeling self-conscious about having talked for so dang long. If anybody cares to kind of chime in or ask any questions in relation to either the Solar Savings Grant Program, the Hunting Park Initiative, or the Second Baptist Church Program, I would love to answer some questions that anyone may have related to that.
Well, Jackson, just let me say that you've covered an astonishing amount of ground and very efficiently in a short time. So we're grateful for that. And I'm glad it's going to be recorded, because some of these charts and things for older brains will need to go and study them a little more carefully. But thank you so much. And please, we do have some time for questions. And I'll also at the end give a reminder about next week and whatnot. Bill, I believe you had a question.
Yeah, I put it in the chat. So you're talking about the homeowner switching off Pico?
So Bill, you may have missed the beginning of the
I did.
presentation. Yeah, it's a grid tied system. We do offer batteries as a backup option, but basically the meter spins backwards. And so they don't have to pay Pico anymore.
I thought I heard you use the language though. You switch off Pico and blah, blah, blah. But I guess I was misheard.
I may have misspoken in that regard. I apologize.
Okay, thank you.
That was one of the areas I wanted to go back and study. Yeah. Yeah, I think, was there a couple of other things in the chat, or did I?
I do see a few others. I can address some questions.
Yeah,
from the
go
chat.
ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So Paige, we answered your question about the tiles. Rodney says, can you give us an average price for installation? The biggest thing for averages is to know that it's really dependent on the number of panels. So if you want to think about it this way, it's close to $1,000 per panel installed on average. So 15 panels, about 15, 16 grand, right? And then you take the tax credit off of that, maybe it's 11 or 12 grand after that. In my experience, I've sold over 100 residential systems. On average, they average around 22 grand. And that's because we have a mix of Philadelphia city row homes, which are generally smaller, and some suburban homes, which may be larger and may have add-ons like an EV charger or a battery system or something like that. So it may skew higher because some of those projects get to be quite large. Some homes in the suburbs can handle 40 or 50 panels, which may be 50 grand for the system right off. So the average really depends. And just to kind of get to this, I see Kaki Evans has said, is Project Sunroof a reliable source of solar potential? And I would say yes, Project Sunroof is nice. It's very important to look at that and say, hey, well, which roof is the best for solar that I have? Now, is it a good source for ROI? The best source for understanding your return on investment or the cost of your potential solar array is to talk to a solar designer, right? Is to talk to somebody who can draw a system on your roof, can tell you how many panels it's going to be, can tell you the pitch and azimuth and the shading impacts, and can give you an estimate of how much you're going to produce, because 15 panels here versus there is not necessarily the same thing. It depends on how much sun is hitting your roof. So if you want a real accurate ROI, I would not use Project Sunroof. I would contact Solar States. And, in particular, if you're interested, you can contact me. That is my email in the chat there. We always are willing to give you a quote, and people may be interested just to take a look at our website where you can learn more about the education programs. We also have a podcast. If anybody's into podcasts, we have a podcast called Yo Son, and there's a lot of interesting topics that are covered. Generally do interviews with different interesting folks. So, but again, yeah, the best way to get an ROI or an estimate of an average cost is to ask somebody to design a system for your roof, which is generally done for free. We also conduct our surveys for free as well. So we'll even give you a really detailed drone proposal without signing a contract. So that would be the best way to go. Bonnie says, does the
There was a question
municipality...
before about, Ray Torres was asking a question about, this might be of interest to you, Jackson. Do you offer stock or bonds to invest in solar?
So Solar States is not like publicly traded. We don't offer any sort of way to, you can't buy into the company in that way. And, the best thing that I would say in relation to that is, there are some innovative solar models that are going out there. there is in particular a program that I believe Liz may know some more about, but at least some people in the world are involved in, which is the Clean Energy Cooperative. Do you know about them, Liz? I don't know if you're involved with them. I just sort of assumed there.
Yeah, I'll just say generally, without mentioning any specific company, that investments in renewable energy, clean energy, tend to be much better, tend to have a much higher return than conventional investments. So there are many,
Yeah.
many opportunities out there.
Many opportunities. The Clean Energy Cooperative is essentially a way that they're trying to offer like PPA, power purchase agreements, where they're putting solar arrays up and then offering it at lease fee. They allow you to sort of buy in to the cooperative. So something to look at. But the main thing I would say, if you want to invest in solar, put some panels on your house. That's an investment right there. It's going to get you SREC revenue. When we talk about return on investment, the investment in solar itself is it's a strategic asset that increases the value of your home, that produces energy for you for 25 years. That's the best solar investment you can make.
Yeah, I'll just say, I'll put this in a way that Jackson didn't state it. I estimate the system on my property will pay off in slightly less than 10 years. So it'll be completely paid back in about 9.5 years. And then I will get free electricity for the balance of the life of the system, which I expect to be beyond 25 years. So, it is an incredibly good investment.
Jackson,
Yes.
Bonnie's question was about municipality tax advantages, if there are any.
Yeah, it's a great question. So every municipality does it a little differently. In terms of tax implications, what I would say is that solar does increase your home value. On average, it increases it by the amount that you paid for your solar array. So maybe 20 grand. That could also affect your homeowner's insurance, could affect your property taxes. It's generally a marginal impact compared to what Liz just stated about how solar pays for itself. Municipalities sometimes have their own rules. I'm talking to somebody out in Newtown, PA, which has a lot of historic designations. We have to deal with historic designations a lot in certain areas of Philadelphia and Mount Airy and Old City and stuff like that. So it can impact. But what I'll say is that, again, this would be something to talk to a solar installer professional about. We have experience usually working in these different areas, working with these historic commissions, getting things permitted properly, working with the local AHJ. So we can talk to you, Bonnie, about your specific municipality. If you have any, they don't typically offer any tax breaks for solar. So it's generally not helpful, but there are some municipalities that do make solar access easier. In particular, working with Lansdale, they have their own borough electric in Lansdale, and so they can control all the permitting with one permit. It's a little bit easier out there. So there's certain areas that are a little easier, certain areas that are a little more tricky.
Jackson, I have a quick question. Do you have experience or is it viable to take open spaces, ground level solar panels that would serve surrounding, say, row house neighborhoods, North Philadelphia or wherever? And I was also thinking, driving through North Philadelphia, you're aware of all these, the old industrial areas where you have these still standing tall structures. Some are now used for different kind of storage purposes or whatever. And again, they must have enormous roofs. So I was thinking about how you might access sites for impacted row house neighborhoods.
Great question, John. Now, one of the things that is limiting our ability to do what you described of having one big array helping a lot of different houses is that we don't have legislation called community solar here in Pennsylvania. That is something you have in New Jersey and in other states that it basically allows large developments you can opt into that solar array, saying, oh, I want to get my power from John Brown's local solar array. Now, That's not something we can do in Pennsylvania. It's a very simple accounting mechanism, but unfortunately, it's a complicated policy change that we need to get through a obstructionist legislature. So unfortunately, that is the case. I will say some of the, accounting and wizardry around virtual net metering that we're doing with PIN is sort of that example. But the main thing there is that all the bills that are being covered have to be in the same person's name. So if you wanted it to help several homeowners, for example, one entity would have to take over the bills for all of those homeowners. So what example of that in North Philadelphia is, if people are familiar with the Women's Community Revitalization Project, they are developing an affordable housing development, but they intend to keep all of the bills in their name, and then they want to put solar on there and potentially offset multiple people's bills. But that would have to be a single entity owning those bills until we get community solar, in which you're allowed to sort of like opt into arrays that you don't own or not on your property. So that would be that.
Thank you for that. And I see just a couple more questions and then we'll wrap up.
I have a question.
Yep. Go ahead, Dick.
Question on security. Cadillac converters are becoming quite an industry. You get under your car and cut it off in 20 minutes or less, and your catalytic converter is gone. What kind of security would you have that would not be an industry to be pilfered?
Yeah, I hear you. Here's what I'll say. We've installed almost 1,000 solar installations in the Philadelphia area. That's probably at least 10, 20,000 solar panels. We never haven't had one stolen. I've never heard of it. People often say it, but what are you going to do with a solar panel? Scrap it? It's not worth anything. It's like a catalytic converter. I mean, there's nobody who wants to buy your solar panel. We're not buying black market solar panels, and other solar companies aren't either. So we've never had it happen. One thing I'll say for flat roofs and row homes is that you can't see them up there, right? They're invisible unless you're on the roof itself. The other thing is that they are mounted to the roof. So, and they're wired in. So people aren't out here stealing, what you call it, like dishes, cable dishes on your roof. Why are they going to steal a solar panel? I haven't seen it happen. People bring it up, but I've never heard of it personally.
Thank you.
Whereas we have had our catalytic converter stolen off our Prius 3 times as a company.
Okay. There's Dolores had a question about compatible with slate roofs.
Nope, we don't do slate.
Yeah.
Slate is a very difficult material to work with. If you want to get solar, you got to replace that roof with a different material. We can sometimes, there are like faux slate, like plastic shingles that we can have to match the look if that's something you're interested in, but we will not install solar on a slate roof, unfortunately.
And finally, I think a question about compatibility with a heat pump.
Heat pumps are lovely, and they're a really great way to get off of fossil fuels entirely because you no longer have to rely on gas, but they will increase your electric bill. So the important thing is, if you're looking to get heat pumps or you've integrated them recently, let's make sure that we're planning for what your increased electrical load will be. And that may be the case as well for an electric vehicle. If you plan to get an EV down the line, maybe let's get you a little bit more solar panels on your house so to cover the increased load that may come from that heat pump or the EV.
Okay, well, we look forward to another session next week. If you joined us a bit late, we said at the beginning that we'll have a second Adult Academy next week to not only deal with areas of interest questions, follow up. Jackson's agreed to come back and be with us, but we'll also talk about the survey and the results of the survey and deal with some of the issues that arise from the survey or expressions of interest. So thank you very much. I just wanted to note that we had 31 participants by my count, and Jackson, you've just done a marvelous job. 2 shout outs though, quickly. One is to Mark, who is now chairing this new Climate Action Committee that several of us are on. Mark wants to make sure that we welcome participation, anyone who's interested in this and would like to be involved with environmental justice and and particularly what FUMCOG in the community and partnership can do more than we're doing, which is a good deal of opportunity. So thank you, Mark, for your leadership and your diligence. And then finally, Larry Moyer really has brought a great deal to our beginning understanding. Spark plug of the PHIN Second Baptist Project that got the Julie Morgan Fund and the trustees engaged. So Larry, great leadership, and thanks for your good work.
Thank you. I couldn't be happier than seeing this number of people this morning.
Yeah, it's wonderful and to be continued. But for now, let's give Jackson a good FUMCOG. Thank you.
Thank you all.